It happened in a quiet neighborhood of Zaragoza at the beginning of spring, at a time when no one could have imagined that the behavior of a 6-year-old boy could be connected to the interstellar object 3I Atlas. Life in the family home followed its normal rhythm. Lucas, a reserved but curious child, spent his afternoons playing in his room, building simple structures and leafing through picture books without much interest. Everything suggested he was an ordinary boy with no special inclination toward any particular subject. In the first weeks of the month, the house filled with the usual sounds: background television programs, pending chores, quick meals, and the occasional news about 3I Atlas flashing on the screen. Nothing seemed to directly affect the child's routine, yet almost imperceptibly, Lucas began to show small changes that did not immediately draw attention. He lingered longer in front of the screen whenever images of the comet appeared. It was not excitement. It was not fear. He simply paused 1 second longer than usual. The changes were too subtle to raise suspicion. Lucas would freeze for a few moments at the table, holding a pencil without knowing what to draw. Some afternoons he pushed toys from one place to another with less energy than before, as though his mind were occupied with something unrelated to his games. Only his mother noticed, with a certain curiosity, that the boy seemed distracted in moments he used to fill with laughter or spontaneous questions. The first clear sign arrived so discreetly that it could easily have gone unnoticed. Lucas began tracing straight lines on blank sheets. Not complete drawings, just lines. Some were long, others curved slightly. They did not represent recognizable figures. They did not follow any typical childish pattern. They repeated with unexpected insistence. His mother assumed it was a new game, an attempt to experiment with the pencil. But the constant repetition stirred an unease that was hard to explain. As the days passed, the lines began to acquire an intention that did not fit the child's usual behavior. Some had soft curves that connected to one another. Others showed a very marked direction, as if they formed roots. Lucas did not seem aware of the pattern he was creating. He wove the lines with unusual calm, neither seeking approval nor showing interest in keeping them. He finished each drawing, set the paper aside, and returned to his routine. The behavior became more evident when it coincided with new reports about 3I Atlas. News broadcasts spoke of variations in its trajectory, though the details lasted only a few seconds on air. Lucas, however, remained motionless every time those images appeared. His eyes followed the object's path without blinking, as though tracking something that was not being explained in the report. His mother did not know what to think. An invisible connection existed between the child and those graphs. It was not obsession. It was not childish fascination. It was more like a silent recognition. Something in his expression conveyed the feeling that he understood what he was seeing, even though he lacked the words to explain it. The days went by without major apparent changes, but the overall atmosphere in the house began to shift. Lucas remained the same quiet boy as always, yet his gestures seemed guided by an inner logic no one else could grasp. His hands drew lines that appeared to have purpose. His attention focused solely on that distant object scientists were discussing, and the intensity of that concentration grew little by little, as if something inside him were awakening. The suspicion that this was not mere childish curiosity slowly began to take shape. And although the family did not yet know it, those effortless lines the boy drew would be the first clue that Lucas was sensing something about 3I Atlas that no expert had yet managed to see. As the days passed, Lucas's behavior acquired an even more disturbing tone. What at first seemed like simple, purposeless lines began to transform into complete trajectories, almost always curved, that ended up connecting to one another as if forming an invisible map. It was not a childish drawing, nor did it imitate anything he had seen in stories or on television. It was rather a pattern that repeated with a precision impossible to attribute to chance. One afternoon, while his mother was tidying the kitchen, she found a sheet on the table that Lucas had left there without importance. It was not a recognizable figure, but something was peculiar. a long line that curved gently at its end, accompanied by small marks that seemed to indicate specific points. The strangest thing was how the curve deviated, as if avoiding an obstacle. His mother studied it for a few seconds, unable to identify what her son had meant to represent. That same evening, while preparing dinner, she heard the television from the living room. Lucas sat motionless in front of the screen, watching a report about 3I Atlas. They showed a simple graph displaying the object S trajectory and a slight modification detected by European astronomers. Her heart skipped a beat when she realized that curved line with its small final deviation was almost identical to the drawing her son had made hours earlier. She tried to convince herself it was coincidence. Children's drawings can look like anything if one wants to see a pattern. But while putting the sheets away in a drawer, she discovered that Lucas had repeated the same curve 3 times on different papers. All showed that specific deviation, all drawn with the same firm stroke, without corrections. The next day, Lucas began asking questions that did not correspond to a child his age. He did not ask what a comet was or why it shone. He asked things like, why doesn't T3I Atlas go straight? Or what is in front of it that it has to avoid? His mother did not know how to answer. He did not seem to speak from childish imagination, but from a kind of inner certainty, as if describing something he remembered having seen. The questions grew more specific. Lucas pointed at graphs on television and said they were not showing what was there before, as if he knew the trajectory had been different days earlier. He even showed frustration when the animations did not match what he had in his head. At first, the parents tried to calm themselves by thinking Lucas was simply mixing herd information without understanding it. But the precision increased alarmingly. His drawings no longer contained only curves. He began adding small parallel strokes around the trajectory, as if representing something that accompanied the object or influenced it. He never explained what they were. He only said they were there, even if no one sees them. Nights grew quieter. The atmosphere in the house became strange, as though an invisible tension had settled in every room. Lucas remained calm, but his gestures conveyed the sensation that he was observing something that did not exist for the others. When he went to bed, he stared at the ceiling for long minutes, following imaginary lines with his eyes. One Saturday morning, while his father watched the news, Lucas approached without a word, took a blank sheet, and drew a long curve with a sharp turn right at the end. Then he placed the pencil on the table and went off to play, as if none of it mattered. That same afternoon, news channels broadcast an urgent statement from the European Space Agency. An unexpected variation had been detected in the trajectory of 3I Atlas. A slight turn, almost imperceptible to the public, but scientifically impossible to ignore. The deviation was exactly the same as the one Lucas had drawn that morning. It was that concrete and improbable coincidence that made the parents understand that this could no longer be explained as childish play or a string of coincidences. Lucas was not guessing. Lucas was anticipating. Lucas's parents tried to stay calm, but the atmosphere inside the home had clearly changed. Every new drawing was carefully stored in a folder that was already beginning to fill, as if they feared losing something they still did not understand. Neither spoke aloud about their suspicions, yet both felt the same growing unease. Their son was perceiving something they could not see. Meanwhile, in Europe, news about 3I Atlas became more frequent each day. The interstellar object had begun to exhibit behaviors that baffled even the most experienced astronomers. Reports spoke of strange, non-gravitational, difficult-to-model patterns. And every time a new update was released, the parents found a drawing by Lucas that matched the information disclosed hours or days later. That was when someone noticed what they already feared. Daniel, a young Spanish researcher specializing in interstellar bodies, happened to see one of the drawings during a personal visit to the house. At first he thought it was just a childish scribble, but his gaze stopped on the symmetry of certain sections. He had seen very similar patterns in his simulations of 3I Atlas patterns from internal studies not yet published. He tried to downplay it, but scientific curiosity overcame caution. He asked to see the rest of the drawings and laid them out on the table, arranging them by the main strokes. What emerged left him speechless. Across all the sheets, Lucas had reconstructed, almost perfectly, the sequence of gravitational perturbations recently detected by the European team around 3I Atlas. Perturbations known to only a handful of specialists. The parents watched Daniel's face change as he examined each sheet in greater detail. He asked no questions. He only mentally compared what he saw with what he remembered from his work. From time to time, he took a deep breath, as if trying to contain disbelief. When he finished reviewing all the papers, he remained silent for long seconds. He did not know how to put into words what he had just confirmed. It was impossible for a child without training, without access to scientific documents, and without mathematical understanding to replicate such complex structures. And yet, there they were, drawn in pencil by small hands. The parents waited for some kind of explanation, but Daniel had none. The only thing he could state with certainty was that Lucas's drawings matched data not yet released to the public. It was an irrefutable fact. And that turned the situation into something entirely different from simple childish curiosity. While the adults tried to process what had happened, Lucas remained oblivious to the tension. He sat on the floor with a new notebook and began tracing a figure different from the previous ones. It was not a trajectory, nor circles or deviations. This time it was a closed pattern made of intertwining lines that formed a structure reminiscent of a seal or a symbol. He drew in silence, focused, without lifting his head. When he finished, he left the notebook on the table and walked away without a word. The drawing had a geometry impossible for his age, with proportions so exact they seemed made with technical instruments. Daniel leaned in to look closer and immediately felt a chill. He did not recognize the figure, but there was something in it, an inner harmony, an almost perfect symmetry that evoked deliberate intent. It was not a movement of 3I Atlas. It was not a gravitational perturbation. It was something else, a new pattern, something that, for the first time, resembled no data Daniel had ever seen. It matched nothing recorded, as if Lucas had begun drawing something that had not yet happened. The parents watched Daniel in silence, awaiting his reaction. He did not know how to explain that this symbol might represent something even the scientific community had not yet detected. Yet the precision of the stroke was undeniable. From that moment on, it became clear that Lucas was not merely following 3I Atlas. He was getting ahead of it. From the day Lucas drew that new symbol, the atmosphere in the house changed completely. It was no longer about simple coincidences, nor about patterns adults could interpret afterward. That last drawing seemed to announce something that did not yet exist, a shape that corresponded to no model calculated by the scientists tracking 3I Atlas since its arrival. Daniel continued analyzing the sheets for several days. He made comparisons, adjusted scales, applied rotations, and searched for equivalents in data from European telescopes. None of his attempts managed to match what Lucas had drawn. There was an internal order, yes, but it did not derive from any perturbation recorded until then. It was as if it were the imprint of an event that had not yet taken place. Meanwhile, Lucas continued to behave with disconcerting calm. He spent his time playing, drawing, and talking about the same things as always. Yet every so often in the afternoon he made that particular gesture. He paused, narrowed his eyes for a few seconds, then asked for a blank sheet. No adult could predict what would appear in those moments. Sometimes a simple structure, sometimes an almost perfect spiral. But he never again repeated the symbol that had so disturbed Daniel. The days passed in a mixture of silence and expectation. The European research team continued issuing official reports, and Lucas's parents followed each update with tension they could no longer hide. Everything seemed within expectations. 3I Atlas maintained its course, speed, and usual erratic behavior with no apparent surprises. Until, suddenly, something changed. One cold dawn, while the city of Zaragoza still slept, Lucas woke before everyone else and walked slowly to the living room. He took a pencil without making a sound and opened a new notebook. He did not seem hurried. Rather, he acted as if he knew exactly what he had to do. His strokes were firm, controlled, advancing without hesitation toward a figure he had never drawn before, a curve opening toward one end, as if an object were altering its own path. When his parents got up and found him sitting there, Lucas had already finished. He gently closed the notebook and pointed to the last page as if wanting them to see it before he put everything away. The shape represented a clear deviation, a trajectory change unrelated to any previous pattern. They did not discuss it with him. They did not want to frighten him, but both felt the same pang in their chest, the impression that their son had just foreseen something disturbing. Hours later, when the day had already begun, the unthinkable occurred. The European Space Agency issued an urgent statement confirming an unexpected detection. 3I Atlas had abruptly modified its course. It was not a minimal alteration, but a smooth and precise turn that could not be explained by known natural forces. The deviation matched point for point the drawing Lucas had made at dawn. Daniel was the first to react. He compared the curve recorded by satellites with the one the child had traced in the notebook. The similarity was absolute, almost millimeter perfect, as if the drawing had been made directly from the official data, and yet Lucas had drawn it before it happened. That coincidence completely changed the tone of the investigation. What had previously been a curious anomaly became a phenomenon impossible to ignore. Some scientists suggested the possibility that the boy was picking up signals undetectable by conventional instruments. Others went further and wondered whether 3I Atlas was emitting some kind of information that only a very young mind, still free of filters and rigid structures, could perceive. But there was a third interpretation, the most unsettling of all, that few dared voice aloud: the idea that the object was not merely traveling, but following an instruction, a purpose, a design. That night, the atmosphere in the house returned to its usual calm. Lucas seemed oblivious to the international uproar. He sat on his bed with one of his notebooks and turned the pages with a tranquil expression, as if searching for something he could not find. When he reached the drawing of the deviation, he paused for a few seconds, looked at it carefully, and closed the notebook without adding anything more. His parents watched him from the doorway. They had understood that, although their son could not explain it in words, something inside him knew exactly when 3I Atlas would change its behavior. It was not intuition, it was not chance, it was knowledge. Knowledge that reached him through images, shapes, and patterns no one else could see. And while the world tried to understand the new deviation of the interstellar object, Lucas simply lay down, breathed calmly, and fell asleep. As if, for him, all of it had been nothing more than part of a mission that was already complete.